Welcome to the About Sex podcast. I'm your host, Angela Skirtu, and you can find me at www.therapistintlouis.com, and you can also find the podcast at www.aboutsexpodcast.com. Now, today I am speaking with Paul A. Brotherton, who calls himself a strong, educated African American. Hi, Paul.
Hi, how are you?
I am fine. How are you?
I'm doing okay.
Well, so we were just talking before the episode started about what's going on in Chicago. So what's going on with the pandemic and everything?
So it's been quite interesting here. For quite some time, we actually did a really good job of trying to restrict the outbreak by doing self-quarantining, as well as closing down the majority of the businesses here in Chicago. I happen to work for one of the businesses that have to remain open. I work in finance, so I have been continuing.
So you're an essential worker still, technically.
Right, exactly. Thank you. But the majority of those in the city have either been working from home or have just been furloughed. However, now that the weather has begun to get warmer, we are in the middle of the summer. People are going out more, and the COVID numbers are slowly beginning to tick up. So as of right now, to try to control the outbreak, we have actually put restrictions on travel in Chicago. So actually, at this point, the majority of the country has been restricted. So what that means is if we were to travel to any other state, including Missouri, actually Wisconsin, Indiana, Michigan, all of the states surrounding Illinois, we have to quarantine for 14 days.
Is that a requirement for Illinois specifically?
Technically, for Illinois specifically. Of course, there really is no way to confirm that if anyone does travel outside of the state, they are in fact quarantining. But that's what the state is asking the citizens to do.
I got you. I was looking at different travel restrictions since Missouri just became a red state, which means, we're pretty dangerous and not doing a great job here. But one of the things that I saw about like travel to places like Alaska or Hawaii or Puerto Rico is that you have to get a negative test 3 days before you go. And in a couple of them, they still require 14 days of quarantine, like if you come into their location. And like some even countries, like if people are trying to travel out of the United States, then you have to do 2 tests, one 3 days before you leave and one the day you show up, just to like double confirm. And I was like, that's way too much work to try and go somewhere.
Right.
And it's a dangerous time anyways, but goodness. Well, and you said something happened this weekend too. There were some protests. What's going on? You're in Chicago.
I am in Chicago, yes. So apparently there was a police officer who shot someone over the weekend. And as a result of that, there has been mass looting throughout the city. So I actually live downtown. So all of the area surrounding where I live has been completely looted. It's insane. So as of today, all of the bridges in Chicago are up. There's the Chicago River that goes along downtown, the part of the downtown area. All of those bridges are up. And then all of the entrance and exit ramps from the highway downtown are also closed. So they're really restricting travel in and out of the city right now as a result of all of the looting.
Oh, wow. I gotcha. And do you have any idea how long that's going to be?
Indefinitely. So until
they feel safe again.
Right. Until the city gets a handle on all of the looting, these restrictions are going to remain in place. Now, I will tell you that a few months ago, there was also quite a bit of looting and protesting, and the restrictions were on the city for almost a month.
I gotcha. And so was the shooting that happened, was it an African-American male that was shot, or?
It was an African-American male who was shot by the police. However, from the story that I heard on the news, the police were shot at first.
Okay. Oh, wow. So what are some of your thoughts about like what's going on in the Black Lives Matter movement and like with protesting and looting? Like, where do you kind of stand on some of that stuff?
Well, first I will say this. I will preference everything that I'm going to say with violence is not the answer. It is never the answer. Using violence as a way to react to violence is not going to solve any solutions. However, by the same token, I certainly understand the perspective of what I would call the African American experience, and certainly as would relate to the dehumanization of Black and Brown people right now. I mean, when you really think about it, we knelt during football games and we were told that we were disrespecting the flag. We've protested peacefully in the streets, and we've been tear gassed and called terrorists. And this seems to be the only response that anyone seems to be responding to. Obviously, they're not responding to it in a positive way, but it seems to be the only way that we're getting any attention.
Yeah, well, that's the disappointing thing, is that there were many ways that protests were occurring that were very peaceful, and they're being responded to with violence and really harsh responses. So it's like, what do you want? So like when somebody wants to make a change, like we've been told we can do these peaceful protests, but if you're going to respond to us with dismissal and anger and violence, or even like putting people in jail, I've even heard of people being like snatched off, and it's hard to tell with media because I'm not sure what's all real sometimes. So that's another disappointing thing, is that I'm not always sure which news resource is doing the most comprehensive news, because they can both be like, all of them can be so far leaning in different ways. And I think they do a little bit of, I don't know, publicizing a little bit, or what's the word, where they kind of make it, it's sensationalizing. There's sensationalizing going on too.
Right, and they add their own media bias to it, essentially.
Yeah. What do you think, like, if you had it your way in your magical world, what would you want to see happen? Like, what changes?
Well, really, I think the change needs to start from the top down. I mean, we have a person in the White House right now who has largely demonized the African American community, going all the way back to the Central Park Five. Are you familiar with the Central Park Five?
Well, I may be, but my listeners may not be. So Please go ahead and tell us.
Sure. So back in I believe it was the early 90s, there were 5 African American gentlemen who were accused of raping a white woman. They were actually put in jail. They were in jail for about 10 to 15 years before new evidence was released that exonerated all 5 gentlemen, and all 5 gentlemen were let out of jail. Now, despite that, Trump placed a full-page ad in one of the New York newspapers, essentially blaming these gentlemen for this rape, even though it had already been proven that they were all innocent. And he, in this full-page article, was trying to persuade the judicial system to give these gentlemen the death sentence, even though they had already been exonerated.
Wow. Okay. So then what's happened as a result of that? Or is it still, this is just something recently that Trump put out?
Well, this happened in the 90s, but since then, he has continued to demonize Black and Brown people. I mean, you can look at so many of the things he has done really over the past 4 years, over his presidency, 3 years. From just some of the things that he has said to how he has put Mexican children in cages. And you can go on and on and on.
Yeah, there's a lot of harm to human rights that our president has engaged in, and I think that makes it so difficult because we have this person we call our leader who isn't very much one of those people. You know what I mean? It's just hard. It's really heartbreaking that we've kind of gone through this much time with him. But like, every time I get into this space, then I start to trip up a little bit. So just so you know, I do this. I just get annoyed by these topics because I'm frustrated. I'm frustrated with that leadership. And so I find myself kind of like stopping in my words. Like, what do you see happening if we have another presidency with Trump? And I know this is hearsay, but I'm just curious where you're at on it.
Well, I think it will only be more of the same. If he gets reelected, he will just be beholden to do more.
Yeah. So what other things, so you mentioned kind of top-down approaches. What kinds of things would you like to see happening in our communities and our judicial system that would help from your perspective?
Well, I think first and foremost, we need to, I don't know if you've heard of the new kind of campaign to defund the police. There's been a lot of talk about that. And what the media has represented it as is essentially defunding the police, taking all of the funds that would go to running the police department and just taking that away and dismantling the police department. Obviously, that's not a good idea. And that's really not what the movement is. What the movement really focuses on, and again, we're talking about defunding the police, is taking some of the money that would go towards funding the police and then reallocating that to programs that would be used to help educate those within minority communities, as well as be able to provide services for those in the minority communities to help them, to give them programs to help get themselves out of poverty, things of that nature.
I gotcha. And so it's not so much that like we're not going to have police in this particular program. It's just, it's funny. I was actually reading or seeing something where it said, people kind of get freaked out about this defund police thing, but I had seen on some meme where they basically said, but they don't get angry when we defund the school, when we defund social services, when we actually defund and reallocate funds all the time. Usually it's to education, by the way, which is
right.
kind of disappointing. But so really it's just saying let's demilitarize the police in some ways too, and focus more on giving back to the community. So like you said, people can rise up.
Right. Reallocate those funds to social services, essentially.
Yeah. Well, I definitely think that could be a valuable thing to do. Something else I've really thought about, I don't know if you've heard of this particular thing, but there's qualified immunity, which is basically a police officer's ability to kind of commit a crime against a person or a human rights violation and to not be tried in any sort of way. Do you know much about that?
I have not heard anything in reference to that law, but it is widely known that there is this, I believe what it's called is the blue gang or something to that effect. It's essentially how police officers will defend their own rather than speaking up against inequalities.
Yeah, and so qualified immunity is just a version of basically they can kind of cover up things. They can now I don't know all the details, but I do know that it's a way that they can't essentially be tried even though they've done something wrong. And it's one of the ways that they're getting protected essentially from consequences for any sort of police brutality. And so that's one that just kind of like stands out to me as really, really harmful is that, like police officers are just like me. So I'm a mental health therapist and I'm in a position of power, right? And so as a result, I have this ethics code that I have to abide by and really consider when I'm working with somebody is that like I have this position of power. So it's very important for me to be cautious of the impact that I have on other people. And I don't know that police officers have the same sense of like, I need to be very cautious with this power I've been given. I think they have a little bit more permission to do things. And it's kind of just disappointing because, basically instead of being held accountable for actions, they can often be able to skirt by and not have that accountability.
Sure.
All right. Well, so are there any other kind of like things? So with I have this niece who's actually living out in Chicago too, and she was saying she's been seeing a lot of riots and protests as well. So like, is Chicago looking okay? Is it kind of like, since you said you're living in the city, is it like there's a lot of looting? Is it kind of looking bad, or what's the state of the city?
It honestly looks like a war zone. Is what it looks like. I mean, I obviously haven't been able to walk down to that part of the city or drive through that part of the city because it's all closed. But from what I have seen on the news, I mean, there is just junk everywhere. From the looting, there is debris everywhere. There's merchandise everywhere. It looks like there have been bombs in each of these stores that have just exploded, and everything inside the store has just been blown out into the streets.
Oh, wow. That sounds horrible. Is there any sort of plan other than keeping you guys in lockdown for what's going to happen, for how they're... I'm just wondering, what are you guys going to do to fix Chicago?
I honestly, I don't know. I mean, at this point, this is what the third or fourth huge riot we have had and a looting event we have had in the city, and they continue to happen. So I think it's really a matter of having, dare I say this, a larger police presence outside to prevent some of this from happening. I mean, when this was all occurring last night, it took everyone off guard, and uh, there just wasn't the police presence required to handle such a large group of people in so many different areas. This was not uh, in just one part of the city. It was multiple parts of the city all occurring at the same time.
Well, and it may be that there just isn't enough. There aren't either enough police officers or it's not safe for them too. I've definitely talked with police officers in this process too of like, what are we asking of them? And the reality is we put a lot of responsibility on police officers to do a lot of things. And that's part of the problem for why they don't probably have enough training in certain ways that they need. But like, yeah, my guess is like some of the police officers here, when things are getting bad, they're just like, we need to protect ourselves. So hopefully they don't do anything too terrible. Not that they're not trying to do some work, but the reality is, when people are kind of rioting, I'm guessing you can only do so much. You try to protect people from getting harmed, but in the end, if it's going to turn on you, you're probably going to go into a more defensive mode. All right, now before we get into this next conversation, I just want to stop to give us a word from our new sponsors. So I am now working with a really cool company called Let's Get Checked. You can find them at trilgc.com/staykinky. What's really cool about this company actually is that they're doing testosterone testing for men and hormone checks for men and women. A lot of people are struggling with hormonal imbalances and reduced testosterone levels, which really can impact your sex life. And so more and more men and women are trying to test their hormone levels to see how they're doing. 1 in 4 men over 30 are actually low in testosterone. Symptoms you might want to look at include fatigue, erectile dysfunction, low sex drive, anxiety, brain fog, even having a hard time making decisions, which is basically most of my client population. Just teasing. But I mean, enough of you who come see me are actually really struggling with testosterone levels and your sex drive. So what's cool about this group is you can pick from either a male hormone test kit, a female hormone test kit, or an STD test kit. And what's really cool is they send it right to you in your home. You do what you need to do to take the test. And depending on what test you use, you'll either have to do a blood sample or a blood sample and a urine sample. And then you send it back and everything's completely confidential. And basically, they deliver to your home, they collect your sample, they review your results for you. So depending on what happens with your test, they may provide a prescription in some cases. Usually it would only be for something like if they're treating STDs. If you do end up having something longer term like hormone therapy, then you'll likely be referred to a longer term provider. But at least you'll know where you stand. So it's really cool. Your results are available and they'll be reviewed by a physician. And then a nurse will contact you for a consultation over the phone. The Let's Get Checked laboratories are CLIA approved and everything is completely anonymous. So again, that website is trylgc.com/staykinky and use the coupon code STAYKINKY to get 20% off. So and one of the things I wanted to also talk to you about, just because you gave me a couple topics you're interested in. So like you put in your questionnaire that you're interested in discussing relationships during quarantine. And since this is a relationship podcast, I'm kind of curious, what are you seeing? What are the trends either in your own relationship or even the relationships of your friends that you're noticing for quarantine?
So overall, what I have seen, and I'm sure everyone who has access to television or newspapers or YouTube have seen this, there's been a huge number of couples that have broken up during this quarantine. I could imagine spending all of your time with one person secluded in a small environment, whether it's an apartment, condo, house, has got to drive many people insane.
Well, I call it job security for me.
Sure.
I mean, yeah, this is the biggest explosion that ever happened in relationships, but luckily it's great for my job.
Sure.
So yeah, people are driving, like, have you guys kind of been driven nuts too, like being in quarantine? Because it's hard on everyone, I think.
Oh, sure. I mean, for the most part, I have been my husband and I, we have been okay. I mean, we're used to spending the majority of our time with each other anyway. So we're handling it. I mean, there of course are certain times where he's just getting on my nerves. For example, today I chose to go meet with a client outside of the house when I have been working from home exclusively for the past 5 months, just so I could have some peace and quiet.
Hmm.
But beyond that, it's been okay.
Good. Yeah, I've definitely seen, like, and it depends on how you live and how much space you have in your home, but I've had clients where they're in a studio apartment together and that's what they've been quarantining, and they both work from home. So like those things that you wouldn't be annoyed by, usually you are. Like, so one of my clients had said something along the lines of, yeah, like she's talking to he said she's talking to the dog and I'm on a Zoom call and I can't, like, you've got this background of a partner just talking to the dog or the cat or something, and it's just like, I need to be professional here.
Sure. Yeah, I've definitely had a lot of that. My husband likes to think out loud. So when he watches YouTube videos or TV, he usually reacts very loudly while I'm on conference calls with clients. So I tend to lock myself in the bathroom because it's a small area. There are no windows. I can close the door and I can set up a little workstation in there, and I will work all day from the bathroom.
Oh my
That way
God.
he can have the whole rest of the apartment to himself. And I have my
Oh
little
my
spot in the
goodness.
bathroom.
But you're both working from home then?
So I have been working exclusively from home. He still has to go into the office a few days a week because he is a sales manager. So he
Hmm.
manages about 30 other people. So he has to, still go to the office and see them and do his management responsibilities.
I gotcha. So like for you there were moments then when you got time out of the bathroom, I would hope, or do you just prefer it there because it's comfortable?
Sure. I mean, when he is not there, I can actually work from my little home office, which I do make sure he keeps clean. My home office is our kitchen counter,
Okay.
and he is very messy. So I do make sure that we keep the kitchen counter clean every day. So every once in a while, that has caused a little conflict between he and I because he does like to leave it pretty junky when he leaves to go to the office. And then I have to clean it up before I can work.
You're like, I've got to work here. This is my office.
Right.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. It's been, for me, it really was crazy. So, like, the first 3 months, like, everything went into lockdowns and, people were just waiting to come into therapy. I know it because I went like to half capacity for my clients during that time because I was like, all right, I'm doing Zoom. And people were pretty pissed about it. Like, they really wanted to come in person. And I was kind of like, did you not notice there's a pandemic going on? Or they didn't care. So they're like, we'll just wait till you open. And I was like, but what if it doesn't so
Right.
I just listened to people. I saw the people who are willing to do Zoom, but then of course St. Louis lifted its stay-at-home orders and I started to see more people in person, and then it just like skyrocketed. There were so many people that wanted to come in, and like I was shocked at how many domestic violence cases I was getting too, which is not a typical thing I mean, it does happen, don't get me wrong, but it was like, yeah, we got violent, yeah, we drank way too much, yeah, we like lashed out in severe ways, and I was just like, okay, this pandemic hit people hard. So you're seeing a lot of people around you breaking up, you say, huh?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And then those who are not breaking up are just having a lot of conflicts that in many instances they're airing out publicly, which is sad, but also slightly entertaining.
How are they doing it publicly? What are you seeing?
Well, having arguments on Facebook or through Instagram. So essentially, their friends and family can see their debate.
Oh, interesting. I wonder why that's happening. But I guess I've seen that a little bit too, where people are putting stuff kind of out. Maybe they're just tired of like doing it alone at home, and so they're like, I need somebody else to talk to.
Well, I imagine if you share your entire life on social media, which many people do, why not share that on social media as well?
What were some of your personal biggest challenges in that? Because like you said, you've been at home for 5 months and they were like some pretty full lockdowns. So like, what were some of your challenges?
Oh my goodness. Well, I will tell you initially, when the quarantine began, I immediately started to drink way too much. More so because there was just nothing else to do. I couldn't go to the gym. I
Hmm.
Even the grocery stores were closed. I had to have all of my food delivered. So I had nothing to do. I don't really watch TV. So I drink. And then after about
Yeah.
2 weeks of waking up with a hangover every day, I realized that that was definitely not the best way to use my time. So I just purchased a whole bunch of workout equipment. So I just began working out pretty consistently, pretty nonstop, actually.
Well, you need a coping technique, whatever it
Right,
is.
right, exactly. And it definitely allowed me to retain my sanity.
Yeah, a lot of people. I just saw a meme on Facebook that I loved, and it was like Cinderella opening up her windows, saying, "What a wonderful day for day drinking."
Sure.
And it made me laugh because I was like, yeah, I definitely engaged in some of that. But like in the end, like it doesn't make you happy. I personally, I realized that my hobbies, all of them are pretty much extroverted. Like I socialize. That's my hobby.
Sure.
And so when this pandemic hit, my whole life just crumbled because I was like, what am I going to do? I can't see people. I had to I did pick up gardening. So I did learn to do things.
Well, that's neat.
I know that was nice, but that's not who I like. Typically, I'd go hang out with this friend or I'd hang out with this friend. That's just what I do. So I've learned that you can have a hobby. That's a thing.
Right, right. And ultimately, of course, drinking is counterproductive because you can't do some of the other things you would enjoy doing for, in my instance, working out. If I'm hungover, I can't really work out very well. So it was one or the other. So I definitely chose working out.
You chose wisely. Well, and
Right,
I've
exactly.
been recently coining the pandemic. No, what did I call it? The COVID-15, which is like your
Oh,
15
sure.
pounds that you gain because you're drinking too much or eating too much or not exercising.
Sure, sure. And now, of course, in Chicago, things are slowly starting to open. There are threats that we will be closing all of the restaurants and bars and whatnot that have opened up. But as of right now, things are slowly starting to open. So now I am able to get out and see friends and socialize again. It's really interesting when you are put in a situation where you are kind of cut off or isolated from your network of friends and family. And you have to determine how you're going to essentially make it through each day with all of the thoughts in your head and no one to share them with.
Well, how did you do that, Paul?
Well, I mean, thankfully I have my husband, but there were many days where I would have lapses in judgment and post things on Facebook that I would later have to delete or send out text messages that I would have to regret later just to get things out. But I'm still here. I'm surviving it.
You still have most of your friendships intact.
Right, exactly.
It's interesting you mentioned that because I feel like I had a similar thing. Like, so we were really locked down. Like, we didn't leave our homes. We didn't go anywhere. Even for groceries, you'd kind of send one person in. My daughter, she used to go grocery shopping with me and now she doesn't. It feels more like the new normal, but for a time there, that was like a loss for me because I liked taking her to the grocery store, right?
Sure.
But so I remember having these moments like where I was just like, okay, I can do this. And I'd say, I'm going to Zoom somebody. Okay, it's similar. You see their face, you can talk, but then like, I'd get a little bit of that connection, but just not, like I really am truly extroverted. So I remembered feeling like, I just miss people. And I would just cry about it. And like, I don't know, it was a really hard thing as an extrovert to shift from being able to see whoever you want, go hang out. And I'm the kind of person, I'll spend time with people, right? So it's not just an hour over lunch. It could be like an hour at lunch, then we walk, then we like watch a show together, then we like chat about, I do, that's my style of hanging out too, is just kind of just take some time with somebody. So I remember it really impacted me in that beginning time. So like, how did you manage like trying to stay connected to your friends and in your social groups then? Was it just the Facebook outbursts or what? Did you try and actually like call and connect or something?
Well, I think you probably know this because you know me very well, but I hate to talk on the phone. So I will text anyone or message them from now to the end of time.
That's
But I
true.
would
You'll do
rather
it for
do
like 3 hours.
right. But I would rather do that over actually call somebody on the phone and have a 5 minute conversation with them. But I will tell you, I didn't do a very good job of staying connected with many of my friends, and it has affected some of my friendships. I mean, for instance, there's one really good friend that I have who actually typically goes with me on a lot of my vacations. I go on a lot of group family friend vacations,
Hmm.
and I hadn't spoken to her probably for about 4 or 5 months. And she had a birthday party, and she didn't invite me to it. It was a recent birthday party, and I'm pretty confident it was because I didn't do a good job of reaching out.
Oh, that sucks. So you're like,
Well,
you're learning, I need to send some more texts. to
right.
engage. Well, and that's the
More
thing,
text.
though. It is hard, though, because if you're used to texting and then just being in person with people,
Right.
then like I had to make the choice, like, Angela, make a phone call because it doesn't feel the same. But it was hard. Like, I think, you and I are both millennials, right? We're the elder millennials. So we're technically, on the end of it, but we're still considered, I think, in that group because we grew up with the AOL. Um, and so, but it's interesting because we learned to kind of text and connect that way. So it was very different than suddenly you have to find new ways to connect with people. It's just weird.
Right.
Well,
Yeah, I mean, right now with work, that's basically what I'm doing. I still try not to make phone calls for work, but email, text message, that's kind of how I guess overall everyone's communicating now.
hmm
But I will tell you that if you could find uh, one positive kind of point or one of this whole experience is that it really has allowed everyone to kind of take a step back and view their lives and really kind of do a life reset. I know
hmm
that I have done one. I've made a lot of changes in my life since I have been in this self quarantine, largely because I've had a lot of time on my hands to reflect and hopefully grow. But I think if we could look at one positive aspect of this whole experience, that's what it would be.
Well, so how did you reset? What are things you kind of looked at and decided this is going to be different?
You know, I will be the first to admit that I have a tendency to be a little materialistic, and I have
What?
opened my closet. I know, right? Who knew? I've opened my closet and looked at all of the really expensive clothes that I have, and do I really need them? Do I really need a fancy car that has been sitting in my parking garage for 4 months? I'm sitting in my car now, speaking to you, but this is the first time I've driven my car in about 6 weeks.
Wow.
Just right. I've looked at my relationships with my friends and my family, and I've kind of created an itemized list of the people in my life, whether or not they really are benefiting me, or maybe I should let them go, let them meet new people.
hmm
So it's really been interesting.
Paul, you're so correct on that. I've seen that, and I've seen it myself, but I've seen it in like all of my clients. Like, this pandemic to me was like facing death for everybody. And anytime people face death, you have new life as a result. Like, you look at life and you say, what means something? Is it worth it? Like, and it's funny, I find myself doing this similar kind of purging of like, is this thing important to me? Is this person still good for me? Is this relationship, where you're like, you really just want to make sure whoever is like a good person that adds joy to your life, those are the people you want to keep. But like people where it's like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if we really did add much, or if we kind of like butt heads a little too much, then it's kind of like, what, you do your thing. I think it's better for us to separate. But like even in life, I'm seeing people changing, like I need to change jobs, or even in my business, for example, I'm revamping things because I'm like, I want to do a good job here, and I want to talk about serious topics, and I don't, like it's just interesting. So you're finding yourself doing that too. Are you seeing that in your friends as well? Like everybody's just kind of like resetting life.
I am. I've had many associates who are or acquaintances, I guess is a better word, who used to be good friends of mine, who are just kind of written off, who've reached out to me recently, which was a total surprise. I would imagine they're probably doing the same thing as well. So yeah, I really have. And I I think I'm benefiting from it. And I think that ultimately, when this is all over, I will have a better group of friends, a more understanding group of friends, and hopefully I'll have better relationships with members of my family who I don't really speak to very often.
Okay. So it's made you really evaluate. I think it has for all of us. So another one of the topics you had mentioned that you were open to discussing is how to manage challenging times in a relationship. And so I'm really curious if you're open to sharing, like what have been challenging times either in your personal relationship and what are ways that you've learned to kind of work through some of that. And I know the pandemic's been a little bit of it, but I mean like just in general too.
Sure. Well, my husband and I, we have been together really since we have been kids, since college. So he and I really grew up together. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and because of that, we've had a lot of issues. I mean, nothing huge, nothing earth shattering, but just, in terms of growing up into an adult and just kind of navigating those types of challenges and how we did that separately and individually as well as together.
Mm-hmm.
But let's see. For instance, when we were quite a bit younger, we used to love to go out and we used to love to party, and his friends did not like me at all. And me being the type of person I am, a little combative.
At times.
Right. I relished in that, and I relished in the challenge. But it really got to a point where it caused a huge conflict between he and I, my husband and I, and it got to a point where we were fighting like cats and dogs,
Mm.
day in and day out. I mean, I could only imagine that he was not happy, but I can tell you with absolute certainty that I was not happy. And it really got to a point where he and I just had to sit down and just kind of have a heart to heart and say, these issues are going to cause us to break up. So we really need to make a decision here on what direction we want to go in. Do we want to allow your friends to affect the dynamic of our relationship? Or are you going to choose our relationship? And it was kind of an ultimatum, but ultimately we ended up leaving the state. So,
Well, that worked out then.
right. So the problem just kind of solved itself. But to this day, we really don't speak to those people anymore.
That's interesting, but I guess, you were kind of young when you met too. So my guess is like, you meet different people early on in your lifetime that like as you age, it's kind of like what we're talking about with this pandemic. You meet different people that mean something to you. And sometimes there's like when you're young, there's your party people that are really just there for fun. But like as you get older, I think people get to a point where you want like more substance friends or just friends that are a good fit overall. And since what did you mention earlier? That they're like family friends, right? Like friends that are almost like your chosen family. So it's kind of a big deal who you pick and keep in your circle and who you don't. Yeah?
Right. I would absolutely agree.
Well, so when you guys then moved, what were some of the things that, like, did you come up with, I don't know, ideas for like, here's who we should have in our lives, or here's what we're looking for, or did you just kind of hope for the best?
Well, I think that people find other people who fit in certain open spaces they have in their life. When you're younger, you want someone who can go out and go to the clubs with you and go to bars with you. And so you find a friend who can fit that specific role. That's great when you're 21, 22, but when you're 32, you're not going to the clubs that much anymore. And that space for that friend may not be there. So it's just a matter of finding people who fit with you in a particular time in your life, essentially.
Yeah, now we've moved to resorts.
Right.
We don't go to the club, but we will go to the all-inclusive
Right.
resorts once the pandemic's finally over or more managed. Actually, I have clients who are going to, like, Dominican Republic's open right now. And I had some clients go there this week, and I was like, well, I guess you couldn't go there. I still am in one of those places where I'm just like, no, I think, you need to be careful. We still really need to socially distance. But, it's so interesting how different people are responding to this stuff, Well, so
Sure.
What did you guys kind of decide then? Like at 32, these are the friends that we want in our lives.
Well, and I think it just kind of happens organically. You find people who share similar interests to yours, and then those are the people you tend to bring into your friend circle.
Mm-hmm. So you say the big thing is that to manage the relationship problems, you guys just had to be really honest with each other about what you wanted.
Right, exactly. And I can tell you that I have absolutely no problem speaking my mind. So being honest, he and I was never an issue.
Mm-hmm.
So I really think in terms of just managing challenging times in a relationship, it's just having open and honest communication. And certainly, for instance, he and I, like I said, we began dating when we were like 22 and 23 years old. So we just, we grew up together. So the challenges that any young adult would have, we had as well. And we just faced them together. Problems with family, problems with friends, problems managing money, or just things of that nature.
Well, you each grow up in your own way too, right? Like you said, you were kind of kids. So like you can each mature in different ways. You have different goals in life too. But like when you meet kind of young, then it's like you have to learn how to work through those things as each of you grows, right?
Right, exactly. And there were times where I thought like it was going to be the end, but ultimately he and I, we've always kind of had the perspective that we're going to always be together. So, and I think that a lot, right, that a lot has to do with the fact that I lovingly refer to us as being very codependent. And in many instances we're very rarely not together except when we are working. So we enter into each challenge from that perspective as we will continue to be a couple. The idea of breaking up or divorce just isn't an option. So we have to find ways to work through issues. Mm. And thankfully we have been able to.
So is that something you guys came up with, like that you just don't want to bring that as a topic, like rather than us saying we should end this or divorce, let's find a way to work on it? Like, did you guys actually come to that conclusion with each other, or is it just kind of an understanding between the two of you?
Oh, no, we actually have had conversations because there have been times where we've broken up for 2 days and gotten back together. It's the end of us. And then 2 days later, we can't stand to have one of us sleep on the couch while the other sleeps in the bed. So typically it only lasts about a day and then we're back together. But thankfully, we have not had any of those types of issues in the past 5 or 6 years. I mean, now we're pretty old. We're pretty seasoned at this now.
You've gotten over the little mini breakups here and there.
Right. I mean, it gets to a point where you fought over everything you could possibly fight over, and you've already resolved those issues. So there's just really nothing else to fight over. And of course, he and I are very blessed. We don't have children or we don't have financial issues. We thankfully, throughout this entire COVID experience, he and I both have been able to continue to work. So we don't have a lot of the challenges that many other families or couples have. Mm-hmm. So in terms of what we do, what we would argue over is really pretty minuscule, pretty minor.
Yeah, it's the little things like we're just annoying each other here and there. But it is, I will say that's been the difference between couples who are doing well and couples that are struggling too, is that this pandemic definitely highlighted if a couple was financially struggling, if they weren't on the same page about parenting or, any of those things. This pandemic really brought it to the forefront for people. And I think that sometimes the way we were living before was just very busy, so people could kind of divide and conquer and live their separate lives. They still would sometimes get bothered by each other, but if they had kind of separate lives, they were able to ignore it some or put it on a shelf, compartmentalize it. But it's like once this hit, people couldn't do that anymore. It was right in your face. If you guys struggled with money and paying like way too much for stuff, then like you saw it right then because it was like, oh my God, we don't know if we're going to have money, like.
Sure.
I'm seeing it in housing actually too. Like apparently it's a seller's market right now, at least here in St. Louis. And that means that what it means is everybody's hunkered down. Nobody's leaving their homes. So those people who are looking for homes can't find them. And so if there is a home, it's getting sold in like a day. And I only know this because I've been paying attention to a friend on Facebook who's house hunting, and she's like, every house that I put a bid on it's like gone from my hands in a second. It's just interesting. I don't know if it's what it's like out in Chicago, but my guess is a lot of people are like, if you have something, don't lose it.
Sure. And right now, I was actually just having a conversation with one of my coworkers about this. I actually refer to it as a buyer's market because most people are hunkering down and are not purchasing property. So if you are looking to purchase property, there are those who have been settled down with property that they're trying to get rid of, and now they're reducing the rates, they're reducing the overall cost of their property just to get it out of their hands.
Interesting. So you think it's a little bit of both, huh?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. Coincidentally was at the end of last year, I was considering purchasing a condo. I'm still considering it. However, now with the way the financial industry is looking, I'm not sure I'm going to jump on that right now. But it'll be interesting. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. There's a lot of changes. Well, Paul, it was great having you on. Are there any final things or final thoughts you'd want to leave for any of my listeners? I know we've talked about a bunch, so...
My goodness, a final thought.
Yeah, just final thoughts.
Just have faith in yourself and your family, and you will be able to get through these difficult times.
Thanks, Paul. And of course, this has been Angela Skirtu. You've been listening to the About Sex podcast at www.aboutsexpodcast.com, or you can find me at www.therapistintstlouis.com. We've been speaking with Paul A. Brotherton, a strong, educated African-American male. And thank you all for joining us. Stay kinky, St. Louis.